morning.
Good morning.
We're so glad that you're here with us, students and parents and staff, for the first hour of our morning together. As we know, this is International Week, and as a special event during International Week, we decided to host our monthly Heritage Panel during the week and focus on the topic of internationalism. What does it really mean to be a global citizen? What does being an international citizen of the world really even mean? And what does that mean living in Indiana? If we went through the room here, every single one of you would have a different answer to that question. Every single one of you has a different background, a different heritage, a different identity, a different story of how you got to Indianapolis on September 17th, 2024. And all of us share that unique background, even though it's different. So one of the beautiful things, or I should say probably the most beautiful thing about the International School of Indiana is our community. Last year, we built what's our new 5-year strategic plan. And when I met with so many people in our community, do you know the number one reason people love to be at ISI? The community, the diverse community. The fact that every single person here loves internationalism and has a different definition of internationalism and has a different perspective of what it means to be a global citizen living as a Hoosier today. So that's the most beautiful, precious thing about our community, is how diverse and unique it is. I know that's what I love about being part of our school. So I have the honor of having 4 wonderful members of our community who were willing to be part of this morning and share what internationalism means to them. So they're going to have a chance to each introduce themselves. In particular, I want to thank Darren Ho, our moderator. We have monthly heritage panels, and he's helped us lead every one of them throughout the month. And he's going to help the other 3 panelists introduce themselves. But I hope more than anything, today, you just listen and appreciate your own international identity, because every one of you has a personal story to think about, and then you can also reflect on what they're going to share with us today. So thank you so much for being here. Darren, I'll hand it to you.
Thanks, Liz. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Well, my name is Darren Ho, and I'm so proud to be an ISI parent to 3 wonderful children, Lauren, Colson, and Reagan. We're all in the Mandarin track here, and we've got 2 in the upper school, in middle school, and 1 still here in the lower school. And I wanted to start by welcoming everybody in the audience today, and particularly our panelists who will introduce themselves today, and start with answering the question, what is internationalism? Now, before we do that, I wanted to just remind ourselves in the audience that we are all in this school and have chosen to be here to support the mission that we believe is important, which is that our school is providing our students with not only a world-class education, but an education that prepares them to be responsible citizens and effective leaders in the world, a globalizing world, and a world that's interdependent, a world that actually needs each other more now than it ever did before. And we want to make sure that what we're doing here today helps us continue to pursue that mission. Yeah. We are all students in this room, including the panelists today. We're all learners, and I would love to just ask all of you to just have a posture of learning and curiosity today. And maybe you might even discover something about yourself through our conversation today. So internationalism, to me, this week is really special, because to me internationalism means my story gets to be part of the story of where I'm at right now. And my story is just multiple generations of people that have been born in a country and left that country only to go to another country. In fact, my children are fourth generation who are born not in the same country their parents were born. And that in itself is quite a story. And as we listen to our panelists here today talk about what international means to them, they'll introduce themselves as well as tell us about how they're connected to the school through their children. So how about Anna Marie?
Good morning, all. I am Anna Maria Forget Betancourt. My daughter is Anna. She's in 9th grade. We've been here for international school for 9 years, actually. It was our choice as a school when we came from Puerto Rico. I've been part of the community for international school as a room captain mom, as part of the PA board, as a volunteer, and as I've gone through the journey of being an international school, internationalism for me has become part of our day-to-day. And so as a concept, internationalism is that sense of cooperation between countries, finding what we have in common, and working towards how that benefits us as global citizens, right? And so I think that's a concept that international school has as a mission and a vision, and we wanted to be part of that in our family.
Thank you very much. Great. Good.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashish Kalgankar. My daughter Maya is in the 9th grade with Anna's daughter as well. My voice is a little hoarse, mainly from screaming at the recent volleyball game where the Griffins dominated, and they continue to do so. So if you haven't seen any of those games, you should definitely do that. Internationalism, this is an amazing topic. I think that for myself as an immigrant to this country, when I was 9 or 10-ish, English was my third language, so coming into the country with a third language and then figuring out how to navigate the state from there, of everything from schooling and even for translating for my parents when it was time and needed, and just kind of growing up through all of that stuff as well. I think that, and even then to the point that Darren was making earlier, our first daughter was born in Austria, and that was because I was on an assignment for Eli Lilly and Company there for 3 years. And so even then, for the first 3 years of her life, everything was in German. And so when you think about where the world has come to now and how things have changed, is that whether or not you like it, you are going to be international. You're going to be impacted by the fact that there are people around you that have these very intricate backgrounds, and in an effort to prepare for that, there's really no book that's out there, but it's just more of this knowledge and an understanding that, hey, we need to be aware of things that are out there. And we always say, hey, everybody has a story you don't know. I think internationalism is the exact example of what that means. So hopefully you will leave here a little bit more curious about those around you and be prepared to ask questions, not only to us, to each other, but also as you move forward in your lives. And before you make a decision or before you have any kind of a judgment on anything, you will get yourself to ask that question as to what happened, why, and how can that inform the decision that you're making, the situation that you're in. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ashish. Yeah, David.
Thank you. I've had a 30-year relationship with the ISI. During those 30 years, I've worn many hats and served in many roles. I was on the board of directors. I was a president of our board. I have served on many committees with other people that were responsible for the design, construction, and implementation of building these buildings and creating our beautiful campus here at ISI. During our 33 years, we had 3 children. During our 30 years, we've had 3 children that attended ISI, all graduates. Our first one, Georgia, Started in 1995, the second year of ISI, and our other two graduated after that. And during those 33 tuition years that we paid for, we've had so many positive experiences, and we're just blessed to be here, and it's something that we'll always be appreciative of. As we speak of internationalism today, my view is it's a concept. Internationalism is a concept that's synonymous with open-mindedness. And it's a recognition that there are many ways to approach life. And those differences are something that we should aspire to be excited about and be curious about, but we should never fear it. Counterintuitively, I think internationalism has less to do with countries and more to do with cultures. And so I think whether we travel to Martinsville, Indiana, or Manila, I think you can practice internationalism if you keep an open mind. And I'd like everybody to have that instilled in them as you go forward.
Wonderful. What a great way to get into this panel time here, where we explore the idea of being open and learning, that posture of being able to say, I can learn from where I'm at, no matter where I'm at.
If you have an open mind.
If we have an open mind. We have an open mind. Well, I'd love to get into a bit more of each of your individual heritage stories. Heritage can include ethnicity, it can include your faith tradition, the things that are part of the culture that you have come from. And Ashish, I'll start with you. Share us a little bit more about your heritage and your heritage background.
Sure, yeah. So as I shared, I grew up in India for the first 9 or 10 years of my life, and it was in the capital, in New Delhi. And the great advantage is being in the capital of any country is that you're exposed and you have the opportunity to be exposed to everything. So yes, it was a third world country, etc., but capitals are capitals, and they have amazing opportunities as well. Although we were brought up in the Hindu faith, my dad was one of the people who actually wanted us to experience everything that was out there, so he would make it a point for us to go to different religious institutions, churches, mosques, what have you. And the great part about being in a country with 1 billion people is that there's a lot of those people of that specific faith in that country, so you don't have to go very far to find some things like that. And it was really interesting to that really instilled in us the fact that there's so many different thoughts, but none of them are wrong. Everything is working together, and you notice this with your neighbors and people you go to school with, that people are existing really well, and they are respecting each other's cultures. And so that's kind of what I ended up growing up with, my brother and I. And when we made the decision to move over to the United States, it was, for us, it seems like it was like an overnight decision, which obviously it wasn't, where we just one day we're packing the bags, everything was sold, we were on this plane, and the next thing I know I was in Frankfurt and then on the way to JFK. So it was quite an undertaking, and then just imagining at that age, leaving everything behind and starting over, and really now that we have the internet as extensively as we do, just cutting off ties with your best friends and your family that you can only communicate via post, right? So those were the kind of the things that made up the heritage that I'm from. So.
Wow, thank you. And we're going to come back to you too about what it was like to land in America and experience that as well. Anna Maria, can we share? You've got an amazing cultural background, so let's talk about that first.
Yeah, so I was born in Puerto Rico, but my dad was Cuban. My mother was Puerto Rican. However, my dad migrated from Cuba to Venezuela when he was 3 years old, and he spent most of his teenage years there until he was 18, and then he migrated back to Puerto Rico. On the other hand, my mom, although she was born in Puerto Rico at 3 years old, with the big migration that happened in the 40s from Puerto Ricans to the United States, after or during the World War, she moved to New York actually and lived there until she graduated college. And they didn't meet each other until they both went to Spain to study medicine, and that's where they met. And so then they realized that both of their families had ties to Puerto Rico and ended up moving back to Puerto Rico, and that's where me and my sisters grew up. And so that gave me a international or global vision since I was very little. My parents, although we were brought up in the Catholic religion, my mom and my dad were the kind of people that understood that we were global citizens and tried to instill that to us since we were very, very little. I remember since very young age flying and going to visit other countries in South America and in Europe. It was very important for them that we were raised understanding that our background was a multicultural background. And in my home up to today, you know, we have Venezuelan food on Monday, Cuban food on Tuesday, Puerto Rican food on Wednesday. I lived in Mexico for 4 years. So we live internationalism in our home. It's part of who my family and our heritage was, and I wanted to continue that with my daughter, and I wanted her to be a global citizen too.
Wonderful. And it sounds like also vocationally there's a little apple and tree as well in the healthcare.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents both were physicians, and we had the option in my home. You know, it wasn't. I know there in some families it's like this is what you're gonna be, or it's this or that. We had options on doing that, of choosing the profession that we wanted. But I saw the vocation in my parents on helping people. I remember since I was very young, they had patients who couldn't pay for patient visits, but they would come in with a sack of oranges, a sack of plantains, food, and that trade, that it was so well received by my parents, and understanding that we're here to help, and you know, that exchange in the sense of they're giving us so much of what they can, and so we're gonna provide that I guess trickled down into me and my sister, who was also a physician.
Yeah. There's this really important element here of culture, about barter, non-cash types of things that is quite honestly very normal in villages. It's normal where my parents grew up on the island of Borneo, that you pool funds together to send people somewhere, especially the oldest of the community. You pool funds together. There was no banks, and that wasn't that long ago. So I really appreciate that. David,
Can I
yeah,
touch on that a little bit?
please
Because I
keep
got
going. Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
mine's a little bit different.
Yeah.
I'm a second generation American Jew from Ashkenazi background, which is Eastern Europe. And I grew up in an environment that was steeped in Jewish culture. So interestingly, I feel that I picked up aspects of many cultures throughout my life that didn't really generate from my family's history. My wife, Rossi, is of Greek ethnicity, and then she's practicing Buddhist. So my formative years were spent in a car wash surrounded by African American culture. So I've become close with many families, and I've become close with many families through the international school on a global basis. So when I think of my own culture, I think it's really a melting pot that speaks to the importance of, I think, today's discussion. That no matter where you come from, we can blend together and we can understand each other's cultures and grow from what we learn.
And David, tell us where you were born.
Where I was born? Right here in Indianapolis.
So you're
I'm here, Steve.
only one on this panel. You're
Right,
born right here.
that is correct.
Yeah. In what part of town?
North side.
Okay. Right. And one of the things that I'd love to also get into here about the experience of America is really important, because those of us who were born here, like you, David,
Right.
have a particular way that you would describe the American culture here. And for those of us who have immigrated from the coast or other parts, we enter in with a different American experience. So I'd love to maybe get into that, the American experience here. How would you describe the American experience here? We'll go to the rest of the panels about their entry points too.
Well, I'd like to start with how it was instilled in me.
Sure.
Okay, the orthodoxy, which what we practice Judaism with, has slipped over the years by being in America.
Yes.
My grandparents kept kosher. They honored the Sabbath. They had different sets of china during the Passover holidays. They spoke Yiddish, which, if you don't know what Yiddish is, it's a German dialect that incorporates many languages, German, Hebrew, Arabic, and then the Romanic languages. And I was raised, personally, I was raised in a very Jewish environment, but we really didn't keep up with the strict Jewish traditions. But, and we spoke English, which was different than you guys growing up, right? What was interesting is in Rossi's family, speaking Greek was forbidden. They wanted their children to be American, not immigrants. And of course, my children had an even more blended background than they did, especially from a religious perspective. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Rossi's family is Christian. She's Buddhist. She's a practicing Buddhist. So my kids were bar and bat mitzvah. They went to a synagogue. They went to a Hebrew school where they learned to read and write Hebrew. And they went to a religious Sunday school. And on top of that, when the Tibetan monks were traveling through America and through Indianapolis, they stayed. We had the ability or the opportunity to host them, and they stayed at our house. So, we tried to approach religion with an open heart. We tried to explore or expose our kids to the joy of the different faiths. And now, after setting all that, we also attempted to keep enculturated. And we did that, like not doing Christmas in our home, but instead with our in-laws. And I also have to point out that acculturation isn't always linear. This is an interesting thought that I have. It's not always linear. Like our daughter Iris is starting to bring back her Jewish traditions into her daily life, which is unusual. So maybe, because it's not linear all the time, maybe there can be a reversion to that.
Wow. The seeds that are planted in our youth, we don't know how they're going to blossom and fruit. And I think that that's an important time to kind of turn back to the audience who are here, mostly students and those who aren't students at the school. You know that your story is not just what you think. It has also been part of some other people's stories in their lives and their impact. And you just don't know how that's going to shape you for good or for not so good. And that's life. That's life. But I think what we're hearing here today is a unique story about the multicultural aspect of an Indiana-born guy right here that we can all understand from our multicultural background. Thank you, David. I'd love to go to Anna Maria on this American experience.
So as I said, my mom was raised in New York. She spent all of her high school and college years here. However, her American experience was, as well as my grandparents, spoken about a lot when I was little. They were migrants, as I said, in the 1940s, secondary to that wave of Puerto Ricans moving in due to the need of manual labor because of the World War. My grandmother was a seamstress. My grandfather was a bodega owner, but they used to live in the farmlands in Puerto Rico. So they transitioned with skills that they had to a city like New York. That wave of Puerto Ricans created these areas that we know now as Spanish Harlem, the communities of Puerto Ricans in the Bronx. And so she was in a Catholic school where she stayed the whole week and was picked up by my grandmother during the weekends. And there she had to, or it was part of her education where she had to learn 5 languages. So she spoke German, English, Latin, French, and Spanish. And so when she came back from that and she had us, for her it was very important for us to be bilingual since we were very little. However, she also spoke to us in French. And so that American, or being part of that American culture also came to us as I was growing up, because Puerto Rico had gone from being a Spanish colony to becoming an American colony. And so that acculturation was happening in Puerto Rico as I was growing up. We had McDonald's and we had a lot of cable TV in English. So I grew up watching things like Saved by the Bell, and that was part of that American pop culture, right? Listening to New Kids on the Block and Boys to Men and Backstreet Boys. However, I was also, used to listening to Maná, which was a Mexican rock band, a lot of Spanish artists, Julio Iglesias and Menudo, right? And so, so that Americanism for me was part of my growing up, right? We had, again, that mix of being an American and having the ability to just get on a plane and travel to the United States with an American passport.
Right.
Because we were American citizens, but in Puerto Rico, right, we had our own traditions that came from the Spanish, and also that mix between the Africans and the Taínos, which they're all so intertwined in our culture. So when we moved to the United States, I think the hardest thing for me was that the quote unquote culture shock of, I think it's more intertwined with the seasons. In Puerto Rico, it's summer all year long. And so everybody's out all the time, and we are partying all year long. We find anything that we can celebrate to celebrate. And here, as soon as the winter comes in, everybody's in their home and inside. And so that part, I guess, was more the culture shock that I had when we moved here. However, being an American with the culture and all that has been part of my growing up.
Thank you. There's something about Puerto Rico being a port or an island, in that a case where you have access to so many angles of culture that comes through the Caribbean. And same as Southeast Asia. It's very port culture, so you're going to get intertwined. And the same thing as in Europe, because every country is like a state. You can travel to each one, and it's interesting how the cultures do mix quite a bit much more. And we're seeing that here in Indiana, and we're going to see that even more as immigrations from the coast come in this way. So now, Ashish, where did you land when you first arrived in America? And tell us about that experience, and then where did you settle in the American experience there?
Sure. So my American experience story is a little bit different. We landed at John F. Kennedy International Airport. At that time, Newark wasn't an international destination, so it was the first time I had ever been on a plane, and that basically flew out of New Delhi, and like I said, we were here. So that was my first plane experience flying. I don't know how many thousands of hours it was.
Wow.
But yeah, so I think that, so again, like I said, my American experience is a little bit different. Also, just as another additional part of the background, my wife is 100% Korean. She was born in Korea. And so that additionally changes our family dynamic a little bit as well. And we often are out where people don't realize that we're actually related because, people who are married should be looking the same, and that's actually obviously not the case. So again, more reason to ask the questions, right? But I think that what I wanted to share was that 100% when we're out there, and the United States has been an amazing experience for us. It's great. I'm 100% American. So if you're looking at, if you want to see what American looks like, it's up here. This is it.
Yeah.
And so including yourselves, obviously. However, the experience to get to that point and to get to today hasn't always been very rosy. And I think that it's important with all of you in the room to acknowledge that, of course, the color of my skin is different, and that has put me in a different category of American. And as a result of that, there's been lots of trials and tribulations that have happened along the way that have shaped me and have given me a perspective on humanity. It's given me a perspective on inclusivity, diversity that is different from, I think, my friends and colleagues who may not have had the opportunity to have that experience. And not all of it's been very positive, I have to say. There have been lots of learning experiences, times when I wish things could have been different, and it has run the gamut, of what that experience is like, especially growing up as a person who's of a different color at a time when DE&I were not exactly the center stone of what schools were doing or what workplaces were doing as well. So all the things that you may have heard about, as in, hey, there's a threat or something happened, or there was a time when somebody left a knife on our tree in front of our yard, and it was scary, and it was for immigrant parents, my parents, to be dealing with that and coming through and helping us to move forward. Though that's all of the things that have shaped our experiences, and we've come out of it perfectly fine. And all the more reason, I think, to understand that people have different experiences that have shaped them. But I guess that I'll end with what I started with. We are 100% American. There's been amazing things that have happened as a result of us being here that we have contributed to, and that I think it's a great for a relationship with a country that we weren't born in, right? And I could never imagine going back to India. I don't know what I would do. And in India, they don't look at us as Indians; they look at us as Americans. And so you're kind of stuck in this middle, right? So that's another aspect, maybe a talk for a different day.
I can totally identify with that entire statement of we're 100% American, and yet if we go elsewhere, maybe to the place where we might ethnically match a little bit more, they don't see us that way. It's a weird concept, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same weird probably just being culturalized to the culture here. I liken the coast where I was born to be slightly different than here in Indiana. When I came here over 25 years ago for my first assignment with Lily, I don't think there was a boba place. And now we're all chuckling, and yet that originated in Taiwan, and it's here now. It's everywhere. There was no hot room, I'll tell you that. Hardly any Puerto Rican places. There still aren't that many. But needless to say, it's changed. It's changed, and I think that's a really cool thing that's happening. There is so much coming at us here in the Midwest, and that we get to have a center stage to be a part of. And our school really supports that. I'm so excited for that. I want to turn into this conversation here about challenges, and maybe have David talk a little bit about this. Race is something that there were some undertones of race that you were talking about, and I've experienced that as well. David, can you talk a little bit about some of the elements of race that you've encountered in your career?
Sure. I think I'll approach it a little bit more broadly, because the bigotry I faced had to do with my religion, not the color of my skin. As a young person, I was conditioned a little bit by my parents that as a Jewish person, I would probably be not accepted in a lot of different situations. And I can recall experiences throughout my life that I found that unfortunately true. The first memory that comes to mind is when I wanted to join a local swim club with my friends, only to find out that they didn't accept Jewish families. And then earlier in our business career, as a real estate developer, anti-Semitism played a role in the opportunities that were available to us. There was little to no focus at that point on internationalism. And so if you didn't fit into the Christian norm, then you were on the outside. True, and it was simple but true. At the same time, I never let that slow me down, but I have to say that the feeling of being unwanted sticks with you. It's still in there today. But at the same time, I'd like to think that it's gotten better over the years, but unfortunately, there's always been a belief among some that Jews are not the same race and they're a threat to society. Again, it's a fact of life that we deal with. The prevalence of anti-Semitism that is taking place in our world all over right now is unavoidable. And obviously, quite frankly, it's disgusting and disheartening.
As you think about the generations of what you've experienced and continue to see, what hope do you have?
Well, the hope is right here. The hope is right here, right? The panel, you, and everything that ISI does each and every day. We just have to have an open mind, and we have to be respectful and loving, and find the differences in people as inspiration and encouragement and curiosity. And I think if we have that, we'll continue to evolve into a better world. That's my hope.
That's awesome.
That's why we spent 33 tuition years here at ISI. And that's why at 30 years, I'm still here.
Amazing, amazing. You know, there's something about openness in action that I'm getting a sense of here. And sometimes we're placed in situations that we didn't ask for. But openness in action might look like learning how to ask open questions. When I grew up here in the Midwest for 9 to 18, not a single person ever asked me where my culture came from, or not a single person ever asked me where my parents came from, but they assumed they came from a particular place. And that was one of those narratives that you just kind of start living into. You're like, oh yeah, okay. You're going to assume that I'm from a particular place. And when you're in a minority situation, sometimes it's not easy to stick out. And in our culture, in the Asian culture, we do not want to stick out. That's not what you're taught to do. So the challenges are there. But if we stay open and ask some questions and ask others the questions, in many ways that's leadership. It's asking others the question that really needs to be asked for us to move forward. I'm going to go back to Anna Maria here on this. Just from perspective of internationalism and also being a woman and being in a position, perhaps all these things that are around you. Tell us a little bit of some of the challenges perhaps that you have faced, and some also the hope that you have. Yeah.
When I moved to Indiana and started practicing at the VA in Marion, I did face some challenges. Hispanics as a culture, we are very passionate about everything and anything. For us, any kind of conversation or discussion will include us using our hands and being a little bit louder than some other people, just because that's how we are. And so I did encounter situations where I had people say to me, you need to tone your Hispanics down. Or, and at that level of professional level, in a meeting or things like that, to me, coming from a background of an education of being a global citizen and understanding that different cultures and religions and so forth came with people expressing themselves in different ways, that was a shock to me, especially in a professional setting. Also the thought of having conversations where they would say, well, you're a mom, aren't you? So you may not want to do that shift, or you may not want to take this training because it entails you, going away for a weekend or a week to get this training. And so those were some barriers that I had to work through and provide the perspective to those people and understand, and have them understand those are not hurdles for me. I'm able to overcome that, and in fact, I'm skilled at overcoming those things. My hope is, and that's why I'm so intertwined with the ISI community, is that these kids, as they grow up in this environment, are well equipped to navigate the thought of this world now, because of the internet, because of AI, because of the ability that we have to get on a plane and be somewhere in the morning and somewhere else in the evening. They are going to be equipped to be able to navigate all of those hurdles that we've encountered, but be prepared to do so. Coming from a perspective of maybe having a Hispanic background, but going through a Mandarin track or a French track. My daughter is going through French and a Spanish track at the same time. And so providing them the skills and tools that they will need to be ambassadors of diversity and inclusion. And by doing that, this generation, specifically international students generations, will be the torchbearers for what's to come in the next decade or so.
Beautiful. Yeah, Ashish, I'll have you kind of start the landing of the plane on this. If you could speak into the hope that you have for what our children in our school can be for this community and for the global community. Yeah, what would that be? Speak into that.
Sure. And I can vouch, she's very, very loud and amazing to have at the volleyball game. So again, if you don't attend, you should attend, just to watch us, because we are entertaining. So thank you for that. And I do want to make levity a part of this. This is not a super serious discussion. I want us to be very comfortable with asking questions and being aware. And the point that I want to make as we sort of circle this is that there's world events that happen that we may think are happening in a vacuum, but in fact, when things happen such as 9/11 or coronavirus and other things that are happening, those things impact people who resemble what people may think is the genesis of that situation. So I think there's an awareness piece that I know I've been talking a lot about, just to be aware and ask those questions and understand that at the end of the day, we're still at home thinking about why we can't have Chick-fil-A for dinner every night, just like everybody else, right? So I think it's important to understand as Americans that there are other people who are in the same boat, and really at the, what's happening at a global level versus what's happening at the local level are not necessarily directly connected. Yes, there's things that are happening in the Middle East. Yes, there's things that are happening right now in Israel and Palestine. All that other stuff is happening. However, the important thing that I'm trying to convey is to ask questions and to understand what the perspective is if you are curious to that end, and yet not to jump to those other conclusions that may not be very helpful to moving the conversation forward. So I think that I want to make sure to lead with that and to make sure that people feel comfortable having those types of discussions and asking questions.
Thank you. David, I have to say further on the hope and being international?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we just have to have hope, right? We just, we can't be negative, we have to be positive, and we just have to keep learning and exploring and being accepting of other people's values and differences. And with that, and we have to raise our kids in that educational environment and hopefully that home environment, that they will evolve into the citizens of the world that we so desperately want and need to keep moving us forward.
It's amazing. It's true. Citizens of the world, and as we get into this week's flag ceremony, right? I want you to think, how many flags could you technically be representing through your family at this event? I think we usually have over 80, I'm sure it's over north of 80 countries at the flag bearing. Not to distinguish that one flag has more meaning than the next
Right.
other flag, but that actually all of us have multiple flags that we can hold. I think I can count about 5 in my family. Last question here, and then we'll turn it to questions out there, so we'll have some time for questions. When you think about being an ISI parent, especially this week in International Week, what are you most proud about?
I think what I'm most proud about is, as an international parent, I get very emotional when I'm at the seat, looking at this parade of flags. It is wonderful to see how the kids have grown up and how they carry their flags and walk behind their flags proud. I remember at the beginning, the first time we did it, we still were at 49th Street, and I've seen those kids grow up now. I think there's a metaphor that happened the first year we had it here, where all the schools came together, right? We had the middle school, the high school, and the lower school, all the kids of international school, all walking and behind those flags, and that was amazing to me. We came together as a school, right? But it was wonderful to see how we had siblings and we had kids from different grade levels, all kind of realizing, oh, there's so many more kids walking behind this flag.
Right.
And there's so many of us, when some of them thought, oh, it's only 3 of us at some point, and now it was maybe 13 walking behind that flag. And I am so proud that our kids get to do that. They are aware, since they're in the 3-year-old program, that there's a whole big world out there, and that they are part of an international community by being in this school, but also by being part of that international community as outside of the school, right? So we're instilling that in those kids, in our kids, and I'm very proud of that our kids walk out of the school and represent us as international and global students.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I had the distinct opportunity of working really close with Sidney Terrell when he was CEO of Lilly, and he's the one who has started this school, and it is, and of course he's still here today, and so I think that when he initially started to where Liz has brought this school, and if you all don't know, before she stepped here, it was not as amazing as it is now. So thank you for all the work that you've done to bring ISI together. And ISI 1, they're not just words, they're actually a feeling, it is a movement, it is a call to action for solidarity amongst the students here. And just bringing the students on one campus, as Anna was saying, is so important. So you can see all of that happen, and from the youngest of the youngest to the graduating seniors. So As you said as well, my hope is for the community to continue to learn from great examples like your teachers here, and also, again, I'll say this again, just to be curious and ask those questions and really understand the situations that you're presented with, so that you can make an informed decision.
David, you don't have kids here right now, and
I
yet
don't,
you're still here.
but I have a great perspective of what, how the international school environment and education has helped them evolve as citizens of the world. As we know, ISI students, I think, care about the differences of other people, other cultures, and they are concerned about how other students in other cultures, other families. So I've seen it play out through the years after our kids have graduated, that most of the kids that I know are doing great. They're giving back to their community. They have empathy for people, and they have a different perspective. They have an innate curiosity for different things, different people, different cultures, and it's amazing to watch how they just keep evolving through life. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're researchers, but I find them to just be happy. No matter where they land, wherever their interest takes them, they seem to be happy and well-adjusted, and be able to communicate effectively with a diversity of people and backgrounds.
Fantastic. Thank you, Henria, Ashish, and David, for being on our first panel of the year, celebrating the kickoff to International Week. At this point, I would love to ask if there's any questions in the audience, because we usually offer about 5-10 minutes. Does anybody have any questions at all for our panel? If you did, you'd have to yell.
Come on.
Come on.
Throw it at us.
I'll ask one. It's loud.
Tell us who you are and
I'll be loud. Thank you. I can be. I'm a parent here of a first grader, so I'm just starting out. But I would love for you to talk a little bit about, there's a tension that exists between open-mindedness and the assumptions. Basically, right? Like, people make assumptions about each other. We're living in a world that feels sometimes more and more polarized, and yet this can be a slight bubble of, like, we have a ton of hope for the students that are here, and yet when we go out to the world, we are experiencing polarization. And there's a tension between curiosity and open-mindedness and maybe assumptions that are being made. So can you give us some real-life examples of how, like, what do we do when we're in these situations to be curious, to ask the open-minded questions? Like, how do we do that outside of these walls?
I'll attempt to go that. As an entrepreneur, I have an opportunity to interact with the public every day. So for those of you who don't know, as my family and I, we own hot yoga studios here in Indianapolis, and we constantly have literally thousands of people walking through the door for fitness, which is great. But with that comes, as you're saying, everything else that they bring along with them, and you can see it manifest, whether it's how they talk to our staff or how they behave in general. And I think that there's always a good reason to pause, kind of take a step back and really assess the situation, whether it is, hey, I paid for this thing, I didn't get it, or I have an issue with X. And it's all about asking those questions. And also sort of taking that specific situation, isolating it in the sense that, hey, this is this one thing, and not letting it fester to everything else, right? So I think it's important that when you have an interaction with another individual and another human, it is a singular interaction, and it does not mean that every other interaction with a person of that type for you or for your type with them is going to be the same. And to be able to really compartmentalize that, to say, okay, what learning do I have here? Have I solved this person's issue? Is it still an issue? And then how do I make sure that if it's a policy thing that they brought up to say, hey, there's not enough, I don't know, toilet paper in the bathrooms, okay, then we change that, as opposed to, we don't think you're treating black people right. Like that's a whole different issue, and that we have to then address in a different way. And yes, all of those occur when you are out in the world. It will happen all the time. I think that the understanding of how somebody got to that conclusion, or what happened that caused that interaction to occur, is very important. So that's been my experience, and we've been successful at it. So.
I would say also, those are, to me, specifically for the kids, as we're saying, I want my daughter to be prepared in a situation like that. So yes, she's in an environment here where having different opinions, different ideas, coming from different cultures, having different religions, is what we want. We strive for that here, and we provide a safe environment for them to be able to ask those questions and be open-minded. But also, we're preparing them to be in a setting where, when that happens, they have the knowledge to approach it, right? So to me, it's approaching it as a teaching moment. As Ashish says, we're gonna pause on that situation, right? And we're gonna ask, where's this person coming from? Do they have the knowledge that they need to, or where are they coming from? Is it a personal experience that they've had, right? And so in doing that, our kids need to be ready to say, well, do you know where that country is at? I've had situations where people have made comments and they say, well, you know, you're Hispanic or you're Latin American, so you should know. And I'm like, yes, but I'm Puerto Rican. So my perspective on it is gonna be different because I have an American passport. And so to think that just because I'm Hispanic is the same as coming from Mexico or Guatemala or Peru, and their experiences as Hispanics are different than when mine are. So that some comments come from a lack of knowledge. So that's where our kids are going to be in a position where they can say, oh, well, you have to understand there's a difference between, you know, being from Spain or being from Equatorial Guinea, where their language is Spanish, but it's not the same cultural background and perspective as someone coming from Argentina or from Central America, right? I've had that happen to me where people have said, well, you know, we're having tacos this weekend. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, well, aren't you Mexican? Because I've been in situations where people think that anyone that speaks Spanish, it comes from Mexico. Which to us, Hispanics, is sometimes offensive because we are very proud of the nations that we come from, and we have, although we communicate maybe in the same language, our perspectives and cultures are a lot different, right? So our kids will be ready for that.
Are we ready to close?
Yeah, we're about ready to.
Okay, let's hold hands. This is internationalism, this is America, and this is ISI.
Thank you all for being here. We look forward to the next live panels. Liz, I think, has some updates for online and Zoom versions too. So,
one more round of applause for Darren and our panelists. Students, parents, staff, thank you for your attention on this really special morning that we were able to spend together. Just so you know, we did record this session, and we're going to share it with our entire community as a video so that the others can see it as well. And then we're gonna begin alternating our monthly heritage panels in person and online podcasts. So next month, for example, will be Hispanic Heritage, monthly heritage panel, but it will be a recorded podcast that everyone will receive through the daily news instead of an in-person session. And then you'll see each month the different sessions and how they'll be held either in person or recorded throughout the full school year. So, thank you again for being here, and one more final round of applause for these great people who are here at this point. Students, you're dismissed to go back to class, and parents